תתחבא מפני חי סבא, נצא מהבנות וראה חיילים במושבה. נעל תתחבא מפני חי סבא, צנע הבנות וראה חיילים במושבה. אל תתחבא לי וחי סבא, וראה חיילים במושבה. אל תתחבא לי וחי סבא. הבנות וראה חיילים במושבה. נעל תתחבא מבין חיילי סבא.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין וריח אורני נישא ברוח הערביים עם כל פעמונים ובתרדמת אילן ואבן שבויה בחלומה העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. איך יבשו בורות המים, כיכר השוק ריקה, ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע והלילות רוחות, ואין יורד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. אך בבואי היום לשיר לך ולך לקשור כתרים, קטונתי מצעיר בנייך ומאחרון המשוררים. כי שמך צורב את השפתיים, כי נשיקת זרע, אם אשכחך ירושלים, אשר כולה זהב. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני
הערב ירד לגבעות הכחולות, ירח עלה לרחף על חולות, עוד רגע ושוב ידלק הכוכב, יאיר את שבילי החלב. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. הלילה כיסה את הנוף באפור, העיר כוכבים הרבים מלספור. לכל איש ואיש יש כוכב בעולם, שלנו יפה מכולם. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. אהבתי לקצור בשדות רחבים,
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah Study, broadcasting to you live from the Golan Heights in Israel, where I live. Shabbat Shalom, Vanya 698. Shabbat Shalom, everybody else who's joining us today. We have a very exciting and interesting study. We're going to be continuing the book of Zechariah. We'll start in chapter 7. We're going to be continuing the book of Leviticus. We're in chapter 25. We're going to see something very interesting about the calendar and about how this proves the incorrectness of the rabbis when they try to show that somehow or another that there is a holiday called Rosh Hashanah that occurs in the fall. The new year. The new year does not occur in the fall. It occurs only in the spring, as we shall see, and as we've seen many times before. So today I was at an interesting Shabbat lunch, by a friend of mine who lives here in the city I live in the Golan Heights, and a couple of my other friends were there. It's really a great bunch. It really, really is a great bunch. I'm so happy to have, so lucky to have friends like this. And everyone who lives here is very open, very different, very independent thinking. And I was talking about with one particular person about the rebuilding of the third temple. And he asked me what I believed. So he's very into the rebuilding of the temple. So there have been, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but for those who don't, there have been two temples that have existed in Jerusalem. The first one was built by King Solomon in approximately, I think they dated to around 968 BCE, if I remember correctly. I may be off by a little bit. And it was destroyed in 586 BCE by the Babylonians. So it lasted for about 400 years. The second temple was rebuilt about 70 years later. So give or take, we'll say the year 500, a little bit before the year 500. And it lasted until the year 70 CE when it was destroyed by the Romans. And in fact, if you're ever in Jerusalem, you can actually see the bricks, the stones that the Romans threw off what would be called the Western Wall, the Western retaining wall of the Temple Mount. So it lasted, approximately 600 years, give or take, right? So there's a lot of talk about the rebuilding of the temple, the building of the third temple. And it's predicted, or it's prophesied in the end of the book of Ezekiel. And so they asked me my opinion about it. So again, this person that I was speaking to was very into the building of the third temple and asked me if I thought it was going to happen and if I thought it was important. I said, yes, I did think it was going to happen. I did think it was important, but I think that, again, I was giving my personal opinion. I think that there will no longer be meat sacrifices. I think that the idea of meat sacrifices was something that was limited or that was appropriate in ancient times, meaning 3,500 years ago, approximately. But it's not appropriate in the modern day and age. This is not the way that nations interact with their gods for the most part. In this day and age, they don't bring meat sacrifices. So I said that I thought the temple would be rebuilt, but it would be either just plant sacrifices or the other elements of the temple, which existed in ancient times, meaning the menorah, the burning of the incense, the showbread would come back, but not the meat sacrifices. Well, actually, some people kind of agreed with me, and there is, even in the rabbinical world, some support for this idea. But it did raise a number of issues as to, well, the obvious response was, well, what do you mean there's not going to be meat sacrifices? The meat sacrifices are written about in the Torah. They're given in great detail. And in fact, we study them in the beginning of the book of Leviticus. How can it be that there's not meat sacrifices? And then I brought up a couple of ideas. They said to me that means you believe that the Torah is not going to be followed, that the Torah is not eternal. And I said, yes, that's exactly correct. That's what I believe. I believe, and I put it in these terms, I believe that when the time comes, when Yahweh wants to make contact directly with his chosen people, Israel, once again, then he will do so, much in the same way that he made contact with Israel through Moses, through Moshe in ancient times. I believe that he'll do it again when the time is right, when he deems the time to be right. He'll choose another prophet, and he will make direct contact with his people Israel again. And at that point, it's my belief, and I do have some verses that I will bring from the Tanakh to back this up, but I can't absolutely prove it. It just happens to be a strong belief of mine that he will reissue what I call a Torah 2.0, where those laws that are eternal, such as do not murder, do not steal, etc., are retained, but perhaps things which are not eternal, such as meat sacrifices, are rescinded and replaced with other laws. Whatever this Torah version 2.0 that he chooses to give to the nation of Israel, if this is indeed what he chooses to do, whatever it is, that's up to him. But that's my personal belief. And I brought a couple of verses. So for instance, let me just bring them up right now. Just give me a second, please. So for instance, Jeremiah, let me just find it here. There it is, Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14. Give me 1 second, please, while I bring it up. Sorry, I didn't have it up already. So Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14. I'll just read in the English. I'll start from verse 10. Okay. When you tell these people all this, doesn't matter. When this is God speaking to Jeremiah, saying, when you tell these people, the Israelites, all this, why has Yahweh decreed such a great disaster against us? What wrong have we done? What sin have we committed against Yahweh our God? And say to them, it is because your ancestors forsook me, declares Yahweh, and followed other gods and served and worshipped them. They forsook me and did not keep my law. But you have behaved more wickedly than your ancestors. See how all of you are following the stubbornness of your evil hearts instead of obeying you, and instead of obeying me. Verse 13, so I will throw you out of this land into a land neither you nor your ancestors have known, and there you will serve other gods day and night, for I will show you no favor. However, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when it will no longer be said, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt, but it will be said, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought the Israelites up out of the land of the north and out of all the countries where he had banished them, for I will restore them to the land that I gave their ancestors. Okay, so the point here, I'm going to read these verses again. This is verses 14 and 15. This is Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14. However, days are coming, declares Yahweh, and when it will no longer be said, as surely as Yahweh lives. By the way, that's an oath taken in the name of Yahweh. That's the way you take an oath. Chai Yahweh, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt. So this is what this is saying is, when in ancient times, or in the times of Jeremiah, when you swore by God, when you swore in the name of God, when, right, we say in modern English, I swear to God, but what it really meant, or what it really means, is swearing in the name of God. Okay, so when you say Chai Yahweh, as Yahweh lives, now you're swearing in his name. Okay, who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt. So you're identifying Yahweh as the God who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt. That's what Jeremiah is saying in his times. But Jeremiah is saying that there will be days in the future, as surely as, but it will be said, and now he's talking about end of days prophecies. This is verse 15, as surely as Yahweh lives, Chai Yahweh, who brought the Israelites up out of the land of the north and out of all the countries where he had banished them. For I will restore them to the land I gave their ancestors. So what Jeremiah is saying is that in the end of days, you will no longer say that, you will no longer swear by Yahweh, the God who brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. Rather, you will swear by Yahweh, the God who brought the children of Israel out of the lands of the north and all of the countries where he had banished them. In other words, this implies that the way we identify Yahweh, the central, one could say, we just completed it right now, that the foundational holiday, the foundational yearly holiday of the Torah is the Passover offering and Chag HaMatzot. It's at the beginning of the year. and it commemorates essentially the fulfillment of Yahweh's promises to our forefathers, and the fulfillment of those promises, and in culminating in the Exodus from Egypt by the children of Israel. This is the foundation. This is what Yahweh is remembered for. This is the great thing that he has done and that he is going to be remembered for, or has been remembered for. But what this verse is saying, 15, is saying that in the end of days, he'll no longer be remembered for that. He won't be remembered as the God who took the Israelites out of Egypt. Rather, he'll be remembered as the God who took the Israelites out of all the countries to which he had banished them. This is amazing when you think about it. This implies that the holiday of the Passover offering and the holiday of Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of the festival of unleavened bread, may even be downgraded or maybe even disbanded altogether. I don't know. It's not clear, but it implies that it's certainly that's a possibility, and that a new holiday is instituted instead, which doesn't commemorate Yahweh taking us out of Egypt, but rather Yahweh taking out of all the countries of our banishment. I don't know. Maybe it'll be Yom HaAtzmaut. Maybe it'll be Israeli Independence Day, which we celebrate on in May, right? So the point is that we see here that not everything is static. Yahweh is not a static God. He's not a dead God who does something and then just stops doing things. He's constantly doing new things for us, for his people Israel, and for all the world for that matter. And he will, in the end of days, restore, as it says in the end of verse 15, for I will restore them to the land I gave their ancestors. This is what he's doing right now. That's why I'm broadcasting to you today from Israel and not from Borough Park, Brooklyn, or something like that. And Yahweh is bringing his people Israel back to the land of Israel, the ancient land that he promised our forefathers. Not all of them want to go, and not all of them, therefore, are going to make it back here, just as not all of the Jews of Europe made it back in the 1940s, right? We see this is a process that's been going on now for at least 150 years, right? The Zionist movement is essentially, whether there are a lot of people who like to knock the Zionist movement, but it's a Zionist movement who opened up Israel to settlement by Jews. Jews started coming back to their land. Now, essentially, almost all of the countries of the world have been cleared out of their Jews, except for one, and that's the United States of America. And just as not everyone made it back from Europe, there were those who saw no reason, no desire to come to the land of Israel. It's going to be the same in the United States of America. Not everyone is going to make it back here. People in their own stubbornness are sadly going to die. Jews are going to die in the United States of America because they like their European counterparts 100 years ago are so stubborn that they're going to say, no, nothing's going to happen here. This is the United States of America. Nothing could possibly happen. It's the land of the free, the home of the brave, etc. That's essentially what the German Jews and the European Jews said 100 years ago, and we see where that led. Anyway, the point is that I want to make is that we see that Yahweh is a living God. He's not a dead God. He's constantly doing new things. So if he did something for us in ancient times, and we remembered him for it up until this day, that doesn't mean that he's not going to do something even greater, which is going to make the Exodus from Egypt pale in comparison, and that we'll remember him for this new thing, because he's constantly doing new things. He's not static. He's not dead. He's the living God. And in fact, let's see if I can bring up some verses. Just give me 1 second. So we can look at Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 23. Let me just bring it up. 1 second, please. One second. So, okay, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 26 says, I'll read the English and then I'll go over to the Hebrew for a second. I'll start in verse 23. This is Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 23. When you heard the voice out of the darkness, while the mountain was ablaze with fire. This is one of Moshe's speeches before he dies to the children of Israel. all the leaders of your tribes, all your elders came to me, and you said, Yahweh, our God, has shown us his glory and his majesty, and we've heard his voice from the fire. Today we have seen that a person can live even if God speaks with them. This is talking about the revelation on Mount Sinai. But now, why should we die? This great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of Yahweh, our God, any longer. And verse 26 says, for what mortal has ever heard the voice of the living God speaking out of fire, as we have, and survived? Go near and listen to all, so we can end it there. Okay, so for what mortal, verse 26, this is Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 26. And let me bring it up in the Hebrew. Second. So it says in the Hebrew, Ki mi kol basar asher shama kol Elohim chayim. Who of any flesh, or which of flesh, who else, in other words, has ever heard the voice of the Elohim chayim, the living God, mitaber mitoch ha'esh, speaking from within the fire, kamonu v'yahi, like we have, and still stayed alive and lived. So God is the Elohim Chaim. He's the living God. He's not a dead, static God. He's constantly doing new things. It's like, I don't know, let's say you have a friend, okay? And your friend is, I don't know, you were drowning one day, and he saved you from drowning, okay? And so you're always going to refer to him, let's say his name was Bob. You're always going to refer to him, my friend Bob, who saved me from drowning. Okay, that was a great thing that he did. Okay, well, okay, let's say it's 3 years later, and you and your entire family are in the house, and the house burns down, and Bob comes in. Bob just happens to be passing by, and he comes in and he saves your entire family. Okay, this is quite a friend. We should all have friends like this. I'm just thinking of this analogy off the cuff, so excuse me. But so you're no longer going to say, "Oh, this is my friend Bob who saved me while I was drowning." You're going to say, "This is my friend Bob who rescued my entire family from a burning fire." Right? In other words, Bob is constantly doing new things. He's living. He's changing. He's not static. And that's the idea of the Elohim Chaim, the living God. He's not a dead, static God. The Greeks believed that their gods were far away and static and had no interest in them, in humanity. And we don't believe that. We believe that God is the Elohim Chaim, the living God who's constantly doing new things. And the miracles he's going to do and is already doing in the end of days are going to outshine those that he did back in the times of the patriarchs, so back in the times when he rescued us, when he took us out of Egypt. There's another interesting verse, if I could just find it for 1 second. There's another interesting verse. And by the way, let me just do a sound check. You guys can all hear me? Please let me know. Someone let me know if you can hear me. Just want to make sure I'm being heard. Somebody let me know. Just type in a Y if you can hear me for yes. Hello? All right. Well, I'll assume you guys can hear me. So there's no reason to assume not. Okay, so right. So let's look for a second at Jeremiah 3:16. So Jeremiah 3:16 says something very interesting. So 1 second here to find it. Jeremiah 3:16. Again, I'll read the English for now. Start in verse 11. Then Yahweh said to me, faithless Israel is more righteous than unfaithful Judah. This is when the kingdoms that are already split into the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. Go proclaim this message towards the north. Return. Faithless Israel, declares Yahweh. I will frown on you no longer, for I am faithful, declares Yahweh. I will not be angry forever, only acknowledge your guilt. You have rebelled against Yahweh, your God. You have scattered your favors to foreign gods, meaning you've slept, figuratively speaking. You have allowed other foreign gods to defile you sexually, is the reference. Under every spreading tree, and have not obeyed me, declares Yahweh. Return, faithless people, declares Yahweh, for I am your husband. Right? Again, it's picking up on that husband-wife analogy, that sexually straying wife. I will choose you, one from a town and two from a clan, and bring you to Zion. Then I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will lead you with knowledge and understanding. In those days, again, end of days prophecy, this is Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16, when your numbers have increased greatly in the land, declares Yahweh, people will no longer say, the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. It will never enter their minds or be remembered. It will not be missed, nor will another one be made. At that time, they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh, and all nations will gather in Jerusalem to honor the name of Yahweh. No longer will they follow the stubbornness of their evil hearts. In those days, the people of Judah will join the people of Israel, and together they will come from northern land to the land I gave your ancestors as an inheritance. So the interesting point here is verse 16. I'll read it again. In those days, actually, let's take a look at it in the Hebrew. This is Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. Let me go over to the Hebrew. So it says, "V'haya kitirbu, v'haya kitirbu, upritem ba'aretz b'yamim hahema." So it shall be when you are fruitful and multiply. She said, when you multiply and are fruitful, but it doesn't matter. When you're fruitful and multiply ba'aretz in the land, b'yamim hahem, in those days, meaning in the end of days, ne'um Yahweh, declares Yahweh, lo yomru od. You will not longer say, or they will no longer say, Aron Brit Yahweh, the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. That's the ark of the covenant, right? That goes in the Holy of Holies. V'lo ya'aleh alev, and it will not, literally says, will not come up in their heart. V'lo yizkarubo, and they will not even remember, they will not even make mention of it. V'lo yifkadu, and they will not try to remember it. V'lo ya'aseod, and it will never be made again. So this implies, this verse, Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16, implies something quite incredible, that in the end of days, the Ark of the Covenant will not be reconstructed. It will not be asked for. It will not be remembered. No one will even think about it or remember it or care about it. That's kind of an amazing thing, because we all think about how in the end of days, the third temple is going to be rebuilt. The Ark of the Covenant is going to be found wherever it is. Whether it's buried below the Temple Mount, or some theories say it's in Ethiopia, and there are all kinds of different theories as to where the Ark of the Covenant is hiding. That it's going to be brought out together with the tablets. Those tablets are going to go in the Holy of Holies of a third temple, and everything is going to be restored the way it was in the past, including the meat sacrifices. But this verse implies that that's not going to be the case, right? Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. This is again. This points to the idea of a living God, an Elohim Chaim, as we saw in Deuteronomy 5:26. This is not a static God. This is a living God. And just as he has changed laws in the past, the example being, if you want to talk about meat, that he did not originally in the Garden of Eden give permission for human beings to eat meat in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. If I remember correctly, it speaks about, I mean, I know what it speaks about. What I'm about to say is what it speaks about, but if the verse is 29, I believe it's chapter 129. It says that I've given you to eat all of the seed-bearing, the seed-bearing plants and the fruit-bearing trees. In other words, you're to be vegan. That was later amended when Noah gets off the ark and saying, just as I had given you the seed-bearing plants and the fruit-bearing trees to eat, now I give you anything to eat. In other words, you can eat meat, right? So meat was allowed. It had already been consumed by man. We see that Abel, Cain and Abel story, brings sacrifices of his flock. but now it's allowed. So that means that Yahweh has changed his mind. He's amended his laws. I don't know if you want to call it change his mind, but he's amended his laws to be more in tune with the reality of what human beings are, rather than these lofty expectations that he had of them, after which they just disappointed him, and he decided, I'm so disappointed with these human beings, I'm going to destroy them, and he brought the flood. So he's kind of like loosening up on us. He's realizing who he's dealing with. Maybe his expectations for us were a bit too high, and so he lowered his expectations so that his performance will rise, and or that our performance will rise, or that our performance in his eyes will rise, and he backed off a little bit and allowed us to do things like eat meat. Well, you could say that's a changing of the law, but that's not really a changing of the law. That's just modifying the law to be more in tune with what human beings actually are, or what they had made themselves to be, because human beings have free will versus determinism. We won't get into that right now. But the point being that if he can change the guidelines, if he can change the guidelines for humanity from at the beginning, when they were in the Garden of Eden, that they don't consume any meat at all, they're vegans, to later on that they can't consume meat, then he could do the reverse as well, because he is the living God, as we saw in Deuteronomy 5:26. Not everything is static, as we saw now in Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 16. That we're not going to ask, nobody's going to ask about the Ark of the Covenant. No one's even going to think to recreate it in the end of days, because we're moving on. Not everything is the same. Not everything is static. Or as we saw in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14 and 15, that we're no longer going to swear by Yahweh, the God who brought us out of the land of Egypt, but we're going to swear by Yahweh, the God who brought us out of the countries to which he banished us to, United States, France, England, Morocco, etc. Okay, so God is the Elohim Chaim. He's the living God, and keeping this in mind, it's entirely possible that he will. It's probable. It's definite that he's at some point going to make contact with his nation Israel at some point in the future through prophecy, through a prophet that is going to be as great as Moses, or almost as great as Moses. And at that point, he may give us a revised set of laws, one that's more appropriate to where humanity is at this point in time. Maybe he's going to have higher expectations for us. Maybe we've gone through a learning process of a couple of thousand years where humanity as a whole has learned its lessons. I guess you can argue against that, especially since all of the missiles and stuff that are going on here in Israel, and all the wars and turmoil, etc. But maybe we've learned our lesson, and he's going to reverse the decree that allowed us to eat meat and say, no, you guys, I now want you to hold to my original intention, which is that human beings are not going to be meat eaters. Maybe he's going to revise other things. Maybe he's going to give new laws, take some away, modify things based on not his changing morality, but based on how we as human beings are changing, or have changed in the 3,250 years or so since he spoke to us last. We've gone through hopefully some kind of growth and maturation process, although I guess you could argue against that. But the point being that now, getting back to the original idea of the third temple, the building of the third temple, it may happen, as is prophesied in the end of the book of Ezekiel. It may happen, but be in modified form without meat sacrifices, or maybe there'll be some other modifications made, even though Ezekiel does prophesy meat sacrifices. But what the prophets prophesied is not exactly necessarily what's going to happen. As we'll see in the book of Zechariah, Zechariah prophesies an end of days war with spears and chariots. And when he envisioned it, he meant literally horses with chariots. That's not going to be happening in the end of days, right? The technology, we don't use horses and chariots for the most part in wars anymore. But the point being that perhaps the third temple is going to be rebuilt, but the third temple is going to be built, but it's going to be different. Maybe it won't have meat sacrifices. Maybe it will be some other differences. Yahweh can tell us whatever he wants, and he can change his mind, quote unquote, or he could change his laws based on where he thinks humanity is standing at any given point in time. Maybe there even won't be a third temple, right? This verse here in Jeremiah 3:16, which says we're not even going to think about or remember or mention the Ark of the Covenant in the end of days, in those days, clearly referring to the end of the days, maybe implies that the temple won't even be central anymore, right? That maybe it will just be a place, I don't know, maybe it'll just be a hilltop or something where we go and we bow down before Yahweh. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. My point is that not everything is so cut and dried. Not everything in the Torah is 100% eternal. We saw the example of Yahweh changing his mind. He even says that he regretted, or he repented, or he changed his mind regarding human beings, and then he wiped them out. He changed his mind regarding whether saying we couldn't eat meat at first, and then changing his mind saying we could eat meat. So it's not that his morality, his essence changes, but the way that he interacts with humanity changes, and he's constantly doing new things. Just as in ancient times, the great miracle was that he brought us out of the land of Egypt. Now we see some of the miracles, the way he has brought us back from all these countries to the land of Israel, and that the plurality, the largest population of Jews in the world, is now in Israel. This happened, I think, within the past 5 to 10 years, that the largest population of Jews in the world is now in the land of Israel. So things are happening, new things are happening. He's fulfilling that prophecy that we saw that we read about in Jeremiah chapter 16. He's doing new things. He's the living God. He's the Elohim Chaim, as it says in Deuteronomy 5:26. Okay, so don't necessarily expect that the temple will be rebuilt in the end of days. It might not. And if it is, don't expect that it's going to be exactly the same, or it's going to necessarily include meat sacrifices as it did in ancient times. It might not. But we'll have to wait and see what Yahweh wants. We'll have to wait and see what he wants from us in this day and age. And this idea that the Torah, every single law in the Torah is immutable. Again, this is just as the Greeks have a dead god who lives on, or dead gods who lived on Mount Olympus and didn't change and had little interaction with humanity. Our God, Yahweh, is just the opposite. He doesn't live, figuratively speaking, far away from us. He lives, although even the heavens and the heavens cannot contain him, as Solomon says was when he's inaugurating the first temple in the first book of Kings. Nonetheless, he's a God who is close to us. He's in our hearts, and he's in our mouths. Okay, so don't expect necessarily that he's going to be static. The idea that everything is going to be the same as it was is, again, I think a foreign idea and not representative of what Yahweh is, the living God who can modify things, change his mind, quote unquote, do new things that he hadn't done before, be remembered for new things that he's done that he couldn't have been remembered for before because he hadn't done them. He's alive. Just as we're alive, he's alive. He's the Elohim Chaim. So we'll wait and see what happens. A lot of things are happening right now. We know that there's a lot of talk right now about the rebuilding of the third temple. It's even made its way into the secular, I won't say the secular, but the even American culture, right? Tucker Carlson was talking a lot about how Israeli soldiers are wearing patches of the third temple, which were given to them by Chabad, on their uniforms. There's a lot of talk that the reason that Israel is fighting this war, I don't think this is correct, but there's a lot of talk that the reason that Israel is fighting this war is to rebuild the third temple and to expand the territory. I wish that were the case, but I don't think it's the case on either front. But there certainly is a more awareness of the third temple, or wanting to build the third temple. But we'll see where it all goes. It really depends what is in Yahweh's heart and in Yahweh's mind, and what he wants us to do in the end of days. But there certainly is a lot going on. The Iran war, which is now currently kind of in a ceasefire, I guess, but we'll see where things are. It's been quiet here for the past couple of days. No missiles, no sirens, none of that stuff. But we'll see where it all goes, because it's far from a foregone conclusion that this is going to end peacefully. This could be, my take on this whole thing, to make a long story short, is that this is really the beginning of what you can call World War III, which will be the final war. This is the beginning of the end, the end of days war. So I don't think it's gonna simmer down. It may have some certain lulls, and it may rest for a while, but I think it's going to boil up, and I think it's gonna the cauldron is going to be overrun, and it's going to get bigger and turn into a world war. That's what I think. But we shall see. Depends what Yahweh thinks and what Yahweh wants to do. Okay, so that is my rant for today. Hope you enjoyed it. And what we'll do now is we'll just take a quick break for a minute or two. I'll put on some music, and then we will dig into, we'll talk a little bit about biblical archaeology. We're going to be talking about something called the Prism, not prison, but the Prism of Sennacherib, the Sennacherib prison. Then afterwards, we'll dig into the book of Zechariah, and then we will dig into Leviticus chapter 25. So bear with me for about 5 minutes. I'll put some music on, and we will be back very shortly.
הערב ירד לגבעות הכחולות, ירח עלה לרחף על חולות, עוד רגע ושוב ידלק הכוכב, יאיר את שבילי החלב. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. הלילה כיסה את הנוף לאפור, העיר כוכבים הרבים מליסבון. לכל איש ואיש יש כוכב בעולם, שלנו יפה מכולם. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. אהבתי לקצור בשדות רחבים, אהבתי לבצור אשכולות כוכבים, אבל מכל אלה אוהב הלילות לבוא לגבעות הכחולות. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות.
היו כאן פעם שקמים, חולות מסביב וגם נוף, העיר תל אביב של אותם הימים הייתה בית בודד על החוף, ויש לפעמים נערכו ישיבות מתחת שקמים אז בצל, וליד העצים צחקו הבנות וענו בזמרה היי הליל. כן זהו, כן זהו, זה גן השקמים. היו גם כאלה אי אז בימים. גידלה תל אביב מסביב הפרברים, הכל בתוכנן ונבדק. נבנו בכבישים, נשכחו השקמים, והלבין אז ראשם מאבק. הכל כאן נבנה בקצבו של הדור, חנויות ובתי שחקים. אך אם רק נפנה מבטנו אחור, ניזכר בשקמים ירוקים. כן זהו, כן זהו, זה גן השקמים. היו גם כאלה אי אז בימים. היום השקמים נעלמו ואינם, רק שלט את שמם עוד מזכיר. כמה ציפורים וספסל מיותם ניצב בליבה של העיר, ומושכו אליו כשהערב יורד ונושרים מן העץ העלים. קבצן מן הרחוב או הלך בודד או זוג צעירים אוהבים. כן זהו, כן זהו, זה גן השקמים. היו גם כאלה אי אז בימים. זה גן השקמים. היו גם כאלה.
Okay, let's get back into it, everybody. Welcome back. This is Melech and Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And we are here with you on the Torah Shabbat study. And what we're going to do now is we'll briefly talk a little bit about, I've been doing these little biblical archaeology tidbits. So we're going to talk about something called the Sennacherib Prism, P-R-I-S-M, not prison. I'm sure he had plenty of those. But let me share the screen for this one. And let's see what we got. Give me a second, make this a little bit bigger. There we go. And let me share the screen. Okay, there we have it. So what is the Sennacherib prison? Let's turn to the only rabbi we can actually trust in this world, in this day and age, Rabbi AI. And it says I used to trust Rabbi Wikipedia, but he's old school. Now I only trust Rabbi AI, and he's even not too trustworthy, but he's better than most rabbis. Okay. The Sennacherib prism, or Taylor prism, is a 38 centimeter high, 6-sided baked clay artifact from 691 BC, found in Nineveh. So this is right after the exile by the Assyrians of the northern kingdom, which was dated to, I believe, 702 BCE. So we're talking about within 10 years after the destruction of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians. It's found in Nineveh. You can visit Nineveh today if you want to go to Mosul, Iraq, which is in northern Iraq. It's in the Kurdish area of Iraq. It's actually pretty safe. You can see the ruins of Nineveh, the city of Nineveh, spoken about here, of course, spoken about in the book of Jonah. Nineveh is sent to call out to the city of Nineveh to repent, and so it is in modern day Iraq. It records the military campaigns of Assyrian king Sennacherib, famously detailing his 701 BC siege of Jerusalem and tribute from Hezekiah of Judah. It is a key extra biblical text. So let's look at what the Prism says, and then we'll compare it to what the Tanakh says about the same incident. Okay, so key details of the Sennacherib Prism. Served as a foundation record for the Sennacherib's rear palace at Nineveh, highlighting his reign's achievements. Covers 8 military campaigns, notably boasting about capturing 46 fortified Judean cities and trapping King Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a caged bird. And the biblical parallel is in 2 Kings 18 through 19 or 2 Chronicles 32. We'll look at that. And 3 identical versions exist: the British Museum, the Israel Museum, and in Chicago. So those are actual versions of the same text. So let's see what it says. Let's dive deeper in AI mode. Sure, why not? And let's take a look at it first. Let's get a blow-up view of it. So there it is. Okay, so you can see it is stone. It's engraved in stone. It's cuneiform engraved in stone. Alrighty, so it's it's not stone, it's clay. A 6-sided hexagonal baked clay prism, standing approximately 15 inches or 38 centimeters tall. So 15 inches is about what? A little bit over a foot. Inscribed with approximately 500 lines of Akkadian cuneiform. Served as a foundation record, deposited in the foundations of Sennacherib's royal buildings in Nineveh to commemorate his achievements. And there are 3 that are surviving. The Taylor Prism, housed at the British Museum. It was found in 1830 and was one of the first cuneiform texts analyzed by modern scholars. The Oriental Institute Prism, housed at the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures in Chicago. It is often considered the standard version for study. And the Jerusalem Prism, housed at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, was acquired in 1970 and published in 1990. So this is what we care about: the Siege of the Jerusalem account. The Prism is a centerpiece of biblical archaeology, because it recounts Sennacherib's campaign against King Hezekiah of Judah. Caged bird. Sennacherib famously boasts that he shut up Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. He claims the capture of 46 fortified cities and many smaller towns in Judah. It lists heavy tribute. God, I'd ask about things so annoying. I wish I could get rid of this. Maybe it's really good. Hold on a second. Okay, it claims the capture of tribute. It lists heavy tributes paid by Hezekiah, including 30 talents of gold and 800 talents of silver, as well as jewelry and ivory. In Missing Victory, the Prism does not claim the capture of Jerusalem. This silence aligns with the biblical account, 2 Kings 19, Isaiah 37, that the Syrian army withdrew without taking the city. So we get the general idea. We're not going to belabor it, okay? But let's see, maybe we can see the text of the Prism translated into English. Okay, so it's pointing us to various websites. So we won't go into it that much, but let's talk about the biblical story. Well, let's look at it for 1 second, as long as we're going down this route. It's not that long, so we can look at it. We can look at this translation of the primary source. Oh, this is just column 1, column 2. No, it is long. So we're not going to go through the whole thing right now. Column 3. Since it is hexagonal, there are 6 columns. So let's just read this. Okay. As for Hezekiah the Judahite, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong walled cities, as well as the small towns in their area, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, and by attacking and storming on foot, by mines, tunnels, and breaches, I besieged and took them. 200,150 people, great and small, male and female, horses, mules, asses, camels, cattle, and sheep without number, I brought away from them and counted as spoil. Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. I threw up earthworks against him, the one coming out of the city gate. I turned back to his misery. His cities, which I had despoiled, I cut off from his land. And to Mitini, king of Ashdod, Padi, king of Ekron, and whatever, I gave them. I thus dismantled his land, talking about Hezekiah's land. I added the former tribute, and I laid upon him the surrender of their land and imposts, gifts for my majesty. As for Hezekiah, the terrifying splendor of my majesty overcame him, and the Arabs and his mercenary troops which he had brought to strengthen Jerusalem, his royal city, deserted him. In addition to the 30 talents of gold and 800 talents of silver, gems, antimony, jewels, large carnelians, ivory-laid couches, ivory-laid inlaid chairs, elephant hides, elephant tusks, etc., 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 as well as his daughters, his harem, his male and female musicians, which he had brought after me to Nineveh, my royal city, to pay tribute and to accept servitude. He dispatched his messengers. And then it goes on. Okay, so this really is the key here, right? Okay, so let's look at the analogous. Hold on a second. Let me just get a little more light here. So this is really the historical record, or should I say the Assyrian version of the historical record, that we then see in, I want to find the place in Chronicles, so let's do this. Let's do this. We'll go back. And we want to go to, let's look at it in Second Chronicles. And let me just find out where, let me just look up where it is in Second Chronicles again. Okay. So I don't have to search through it. Where in 2 Chronicles is the story mentioned? Okay, so chapter 32. So let's go to chapter 32 in Second Chronicles. 1 second, please. Cooler air in here. So Second Chronicles, chapter 32. Okay, so again, there's also an analogous one in, I believe it's Second Kings, chapter 22, was it? Doesn't matter where, also in Second Kings, but we're going to go to the version in Second Chronicles 32, just to facilitate things. I'll read it in the English. If we need to go over to the Hebrew, we'll go over to the Hebrew, okay? So, after all that Hezekiah had so faithfully done, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities, thinking to conquer them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that he intended to wage war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his officials and military staff about blocking off the water from the springs outside the city. And they helped him. And in fact, what he did is something famous called the Hezekiah's Tunnel. I actually did a video on it. We won't get into right now, but they diverted the water from the main spring that feeds Jerusalem, called the Gihon Spring. They diverted to something called the Pool of Siloam. Anyway, they gathered a large group of people who blocked all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water? They said. So I guess it's not specifically, I don't know if it's specifically speaking about the Gihon, because it's speaking about all the springs. In other words, the army is camping outside of Jerusalem, and they don't want the Assyrian army is camping outside of Jerusalem, is surrounding Jerusalem, is besieging Jerusalem, and they don't want this army to have access to water, so they block up the springs. I guess it's not specifically referring to the Gihon, although we do have Hezekiah's Tunnel. Again, we're not going to get into that right now. You can watch the video that I posted on World Alliance. I think it's on Karaite Insights, either on Karaite Insights or World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel. Okay. Then he worked hard repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. In other words, he's getting ready for the impending attack of Sennacherib, who is the king of Syria at the time. He's getting ready for the impending attack of Sennacherib on Jerusalem. He sees that he had laid siege to the other fortified cities, and that the next step, obviously, was for him to come to Jerusalem. So this is how Hezekiah is preparing. He fortifies the wall. He blocks up or diverts the water in the case of the Hezekiah tunnel. Okay. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water? They said. Then he worked hard repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. He built another wall outside that one and reinforced the terraces of the city of David. He also made large numbers of weapons and shields. So this other wall that's being spoken about is you can also see remnants of it, or what many archaeologists believe to be remnants of it, in the old city of Jerusalem in the Jewish quarter. It's called the Broad Wall, or Hezekiah's Wall. Again, I'm not going to get into that right now, but they believe there's some controversy over whether it really is Hezekiah's Wall, but the standard view is that this Broad Wall, or this Hezekiah's Wall, is part of this other wall that he built to reinforce the expanded city of Jerusalem. At any rate, he appointed military officers over the people and assembled them before him in the square at the city gate. Hold on, I think my cat wants to come in, so just give me a break for 1 second to let him come in. 1 second. Lavi, come in. Lavi, come, sweetie boy. Come. Come, boo boo. Lavi, come, sweetie. Come. Let's go. Let's go. You want to come in? Come, sweetie. Okay, sorry about that. So he appointed, again, speaking about Hezekiah, he appointed military officers over the people and assembled them before him in the square at the city gate and encouraged them with these words: "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him, for there is a greater power with us than with him." Of course, speaking about Yahweh. With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is Yahweh, our God, to help us and to fight our battles. And the people gained confidence from what Hezekiah, king of Judah, said. And this is why one of the reasons Hezekiah is remembered as one of the good kings of Judah. There were a couple, and he's one of them. Later, when Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and all his forces were laying siege to Lachish, you can visit the ruins of Lachish, Tel Lachish. He sent his officers to Jerusalem with this message for Hezekiah, king of Judah, and for all the people of Judah who were there. So Lachish was essentially, after Jerusalem, was probably the second most important city in the kingdom of Judah. And of course, the Jerusalemites, the residents of Jerusalem, are seeing essentially that he's laying siege to Lachish. So he's trying to scare them, right? This is what Sennacherib, king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing your confidence that you remain in Jerusalem under siege? When Hezekiah says the Lord, or Yahweh our God, will save us from the hand of the king of Syria, he is misleading you to let you die of hunger and thirst. Did not Hezekiah himself remove this God's high places and altars, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before one altar and burn sacrifices on it? So Sennacherib is being very much a snake oil salesman. He's being very sneaky. He's trying to sow fear and doubt into the residents of Jerusalem. Okay, and the way he's doing it is he's saying, why should you have faith in Yahweh? Hezekiah removed the high places of this God Yahweh, again, without going into great detail because we have a lot to cover today. So Hezekiah, there were the Israelites were worshiping Yahweh under high places. High places are basically hilltops or mountaintops where they would set up altars, or they would set up sanctuaries to Yahweh, which they were not supposed to. They were unauthorized. By this time, Jerusalem had been chosen, and all offerings, all sacrifices, all official, all cultic or formal worship and service to Yahweh has to take place in Jerusalem. So Hezekiah did the right thing by destroying these bamot, by destroying these high places and altars. And yet Sennacherib, in the message he's sending, is using this to try to sow fear and doubt by saying Hezekiah took away the altars and the high places of this God that he is saying is going to save you. That's exactly, Hezekiah was supposed to do that, but Sennacherib is playing on the fear of the people and also maybe on their tendency towards idol worship. Okay, do you not know what I and my predecessors have done to all the peoples of the other lands, trying to sow fear? Were the gods of those nations ever able to deliver their land from my hand? Why are you going to be any different? your God Yahweh is going to save you? Well, Hezekiah was the one who took away all the altars of your God Yahweh, which were all over the place. And how is he going to save you if his altars have been taken away? Who of all the gods of these nations that my predecessors destroyed has been able to save his people from me? How then can your God deliver you from my hand? Do not let Hezekiah deceive you and mislead you like this. This is just a classic. This is gaslighting. This is, as everyone likes to use today. This is a classic example of sowing fear and doubt, of being a very sneaky, of being a snake oil salesman to try to use psychological warfare against the people of Jerusalem, against the residents of Jerusalem. Do not believe him, for no God of any nation or kingdom has been able to deliver his people from my hand or from the hand of my predecessors. How much less will your God deliver you from my hand? Okay, you guys get the idea. Just checking to see if there are any comments. Okay. Sennacherib's officers spoke further against Yahweh God and against his servant Hezekiah. The king also wrote letters ridiculing Yahweh, the God of Israel, and saying this against him: just as the gods of the peoples of the other lands did not rescue their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not rescue his people from my hand. Then they called out in Hebrew to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall, to terrify them and make them afraid in order to capture the city. They spoke about the God of Jerusalem as they did about the gods of the other peoples of the world, the work of human hands. Meaning those other gods were idols, the work of human hands. King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, cried out in prayer to heaven about this. And Yahweh sent an angel who annihilated all the fighting men and the commanders and officers in the camp of the Assyrian king. So he withdrew to his own land in disgrace, and when he went into the temple of his own God, some of his sons, his own flesh and blood, cut him down with the sword. And that is actually historically true. We'll talk about that in a second before we go on to the next topic. So Yahweh saved Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, king of Syria, and from the hand of all others. He took care of them on every side. Many brought offerings to Jerusalem for Yahweh and valuable gifts for Hezekiah, king of Judah. From then on, he was highly regarded by all the nations. Okay, so it came true. This belief that Hezekiah tried to sow faith and hope in the people, and this came true. The God of Yahweh did come to the aid of Israel, to Jerusalem, despite what Sennacherib said, that no other God came to the aid of his people. Well, our God Yahweh is a real God, and all of those other gods are fake gods. They don't exist. Okay. And this is it. And Yahweh sent an angel who annihilated all the fighting men and commanders and officers in the camp of the Assyrian king. So he withdrew to his own land in disgrace. Now, again, let's contrast this, or let's look back at what it says in the Sennacherib Prism. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so we saw the biblical account, the Tanakh account, and now we see here, as for Hezekiah the Judahite, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong-walled cities, as well as small towns in their area, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams and by bringing up siege engines, by attacking and storming afoot, by mines, tunnels, breaches, and besieged, I took them. So he's talking about the other cities, but he doesn't mention Jerusalem. He will mention Jerusalem, but he doesn't mention Jerusalem as being one of the cities that was taken. 200,000, 150 people, great and small, male and female, horses, mules, asses, camels, cattle, and sheep without number, I brought away from them and counted as spoil. Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. So it doesn't say anything here, and this is the point that the biblical archaeologists point out, or those who want to show that this is in line with the account that we just saw in 2 Chronicles. It doesn't say anything here about conquering Jerusalem. It says he conquered this Sennacherib prison says that Sennacherib conquered the other cities, 46 of them, right? Oops. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Second. Right. So it speaks about how, or Sennacherib boasts, or the Sennacherib Prism boasts how he conquered 46 other cities and many small towns, 46 walled cities and many other towns. But notice it does not say that he conquered Jerusalem. Nowhere here, what happened to my cursor? Nowhere here does it say, and this is in the Assyrian inscription, that he conquered Jerusalem. And believe me, it would say it, because it's a known phenomenon that whenever whenever you find these ancient historical accounts, that they always downplay any defeats and they always play up any achievements. It's almost like Donald Trump bragging about how he's destroyed Iran and he's got a favorable ceasefire, right? He's constantly building himself up and downplaying anything negative that's happened. So likewise, in a lot of these ancient inscriptions, we'll see the same thing. When they memorialize a campaign or they memorialize a war, they're usually downplaying the bad things that happen and playing up the good things that happen. But so he's downplaying what happened in Jerusalem, because if Sennacherib had actually conquered and taken Jerusalem, he would mention it in this inscription, in this prism, but he doesn't. What does he say instead? Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. Doesn't say he conquered Jerusalem. He said he shut him up in Jerusalem, his royal city. That's actually very much in line with what we saw. Let me just bring these out of the way. Oh, let me bring this over here. That's actually very much in line with what we saw. No, not that. With what we saw in Second Chronicles chapter 32, right? Second Chronicles chapter 32 says that Sennacherib laid siege to Jerusalem, right? Tended to wage war against Jerusalem. He laid siege to Jerusalem, but the biblical account says that he never conquered Jerusalem, because the angel of the Lord, right here, and the Lord sent an angel who annihilated all the fighting men and the commanders and officers in the camp of the Assyrian king. So he withdrew to his own land in disgrace, and when he went into the temple of his own God, some of his sons, his own flesh and blood, cut him down with a sword. 2 Chronicles 32:21. So actually, this is in line with what we see in the Sennacherib prison, right? Jerusalem was besieged, and both seem to agree that it was not taken. Because if it was taken, once again, the Sennacherib prison would say and boast and say it probably very proudly and highlight it that Sennacherib had conquered Jerusalem. But it doesn't say that. It says Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. I threw up earthworks against him, etc. His cities I spoiled, and so on and so forth. I diminished his land. I added to the former tribute, and so on and so forth. Okay. The mercenary troops deserted him. And speaking about the spoils from the other cities that he took, but nowhere does it say that he conquered Jerusalem. Okay, let's look very briefly at the Wikipedia article of Sennacherib, and we'll look at his demise. Babylonia, reign. Oh, it's going on for a while. It's a bit smaller. Conspiracy, murder, and succession. So what actually happened? So when his eldest son, an original crown prince, Ashur-nadin-shumi, disappeared, presumably executed, Sennacherib selected his eldest surviving son, Arda-mulisu. Let me make this a bit bigger. Whoa. There we go. As the new crown prince, Arda-mulisu held the position of the heir apparent for several years until 684 BCE, when Sennacherib suddenly replaced him with his younger brother, Ar-Hadon. The reason for Arda Masulu's sudden dismissal is unknown, but it is clear from contemporary inscriptions that he was very disappointed as Har Adon's influential mother. Baba, we can skip ahead. Sennacherib forced. We can skip ahead a little bit. Blah, blah, blah. Take advantage of it. We need to quickly take the fleet. Okay. So Esarhaddon basically is chosen by Sennacherib. So we'll start here. Esarhaddon's exile put Arda Mulisu in a difficult position. So Esarhaddon is reinstated as he reached the height of his popularity, but was powerless to do anything against his brother. To take advantage of the opportunity, Arda Mulisu decided he needed to act quickly and take the throne by force. He concluded a treaty of rebellion with another of his younger brothers, Nabu Shar Usur, on 20th October 681 BC. They attacked and killed their father, meaning Sennacherib, in one of Nineveh's temples, possibly the one dedicated to sin. So there was patricide. Two of the sons of Sennacherib killed him. They murdered him. The murder of Sennacherib, ruler of one of the strongest empires at the time, shocked his contemporaries. People throughout the Near East received the news with strong emotions and mixed feelings. The denizens of the Levant and Babylonia celebrated the news and proclaimed the act as divine punishment because of Sennacherib's brutal campaigns against them. In Assyria, the reaction must have been overwhelmingly horror and resentment. Okay? So that's, again, what we see in the historical record is in line with what we see in Second Chronicles. Okay? This is talking about Sennacherib. So he withdrew to his own land in disgrace, and when he went into the temple of his god, some of his sons, his own flesh and blood, cut him down with the sword. So that's exactly what Second Chronicles says, and also in Second Kings when it speaks about the story, right? Second Kings is perhaps one could claim more reliable than Second Chronicles, but nonetheless, both of them speak about. Okay. That is Sennacherib. That is the prism of Sennacherib. The key thing here is that he took 46 fortified cities and many other towns, but he did not take Jerusalem. I brought away from them and counted as spoil. Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. That's it. He besieged Jerusalem, but he never took Jerusalem, and that is again once again in line with the biblical record. Okay. Alrighty. So that is the Sennacherib prism. Any questions? Any comments? Any questions or any comments? Then let me put up music again for a couple of minutes. Then we're going to dig into Zechariah chapter 7. We'll get into Zechariah chapter 7. Okay.
סוף ימיי אשא במשעולים בין דגניה לכנרת עמדה עגלות חיי עמוסה והוא ניגש שמעי אליי קטנטונת אני בניתי בית לשבטך, את תרכבי בערב לי כותונת, אני אנהג ביום את עגלתך. הוא היה אז בהיר, גבוה כזמר, הוא נהג עגלות השדה הרחב, ואני לא כותונת, הייתי רוקמת, כותונת של תכלת עם פרח זהב. היו לילות, אני אותם זוכרת, והוא את העצים בגן העיר, את השבילים בין דגן ילי מרת, כי רק אותי ישמור לה לתמיד. היה הולך ושב אליי קודח, היה נושא דמותי מול פניו. הגידו נא, היש בכם יודע, איאן הזה הלך לו ולא שב. אז הייתי בוכה, אז הייתי נדהמת, בשדות רחוקים, עוד הלכתי אליו, אנוכי עוד נושאת כותנתו המרכבת, כותונת של תכלת עם פרח זהב. היו לילות, אני אותם זוכרת, אני אותם עד סוף ימיי אשא.
על ביתנו התינוקת שמורי לי הטוב, על האש המבוערת, על המים הזכים, על האיש השב הביתה מן המרחקים, על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי, אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על נטע קור נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה, השיבני ואשובה אל הארץ הטובה. שמורי לי על זה הבית, על הגן, על החומה, מי יגון מפחד פתע וממלחמה. שמור על המעט שיש לי, על האור ועל הטף, על הפרי שלא הבשיל עוד בשמנסה, על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי, אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל האור. תשכח את התקווה, השיבני ואשובה אל הארץ הטובה. מרשרש אילן ברוח, מרחוק נושר כוכב, משאלות ליבי בחושך נרשמות עכשיו. אנא שמור לי על כל אלה ועל אהובי נפשי, על השקט, על הבכי ועל זה השיר. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור לי אלי אדום, על הדבש ועל העוני, על המר והמתוק, על נתן ולנתון, על תשכח את התקווה, השיבני והשובה אל הארץ הטובה.
עוד יש מפרש לבן באופק מול ענן שחור כבד, כל שנבקש לו יהי. ואם בחלונות הערב אור נרות החג רועד, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. אם המבשר עומד בדלת, תן מילה טובה בפיו, כל שנבקש לו יהי. אם נפשך למות שואלת, מפריחה ומאסיף, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. מה כל ענות אני שומע, כל שופר וכל תופים, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לא תשמע בתוך כל אלה גם תפילה אחת מפי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. בתוך שכונה קטנה מוצלת, בית קט עם גג אדום, כל שנבקש לו יהי. זה סוף הקיץ, סוף הדרך, תן להם לשוב הלום, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי.
לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש לו יהי, לו יהי.
מעל פסגת הר הצופים אשתחווה לך אפיים, מעל פסגת הר הצופים שלום לך ירושלים, אלפי דורות חלמתי עלייך, לראות לזכות באור פנייך, ירושלים.
Oh, okay. I don't know what it is. Okay, I guess you guys can hear me now. I guess you guys didn't hear me before. Okay, let's dig in. We're digging into Zechariah chapter 7, and we're going to get a little context by just reading Zechariah chapter 6 in the English, and then we'll dig into the Hebrew in Zechariah chapter 7. There we go. So remember, we studied Malachi before we studied Zechariah, and we found Malachi to be much more straightforward language. Zechariah is very cryptic vision, and accompanying it sometimes cryptic language. He has all of these cryptic visions, horsemen and flying scrolls, and a woman named that turns out to be Justice, locked up in a flying basket covered with an iron cover, and all kinds of bizarre visions. Really, no other prophet just about has so many different bizarre visions. Maybe, well, I guess maybe Ezekiel, Ezekiel, but not many others, that's for sure. Okay, so we're just going to review chapter 6. So I looked up again, and there before me were 4 chariots coming out from between 2 mountains of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black, the third white, the fourth dappled, all of them powerful. I asked the angel who was speaking with me, "What are these, my Lord?" The angel answered me, "These are the 4 spirits, or the 4 winds of heaven, going out from standing in the presence of the Lord of the whole world. The one with the black horses is going to the north country, the one with the white horses towards the west, and the one with the dappled horses towards the south." When the powerful horses went out, they were straining to go throughout the earth, and he said, "Go throughout the earth." So they went throughout the earth. Then he called back to me, "Look, those going towards the north country have given my spirit rest in the land of the north." It's almost as if God's glory or his spirit goes to the north. In fact, we see in talking about the book of Ezekiel, the book of Yechezkel, and Yechezkel, approximately chapter 8, I believe 9, maybe 10, we see angels, cherubim, come and carry off the glory of Yahweh from the temple, the first temple of Yahweh, carry it off based on all of the abominations that the people of Israel and even the elders, the leaders of Israel, were doing. Okay, the word of Yahweh came to me: "Take silver and gold from the exiles, Heldai, Tobiah, and Yediah, who have arrived from Babylon. Go the same day to the house of Josiah, son of Zephaniah. Take the silver and gold and make a crown and set it on the head of the high priest, Joshua, son of Yotzadak." We saw Joshua, the same Joshua earlier, when he had when he had shit-covered clothes, literally. Bigadim, I think it's a bigadim tzoim, I think was the exact phrase in Hebrew, and he was replaced with shiny or fresh clothes, representing the forgiveness of Yahweh against Judah and Jerusalem, and the restoration of Jerusalem after the first exile. Okay, so Zechariah is speaking at the beginning of the beginning of the building of the second temple. We've been speaking a lot about temples today so far. So this also relates to that, or Zechariah, the prophecies we saw in previous weeks relates to that. Tell him that this is what Yahweh Almighty says. Here's the man whose name is the branch, Tzemach, and he will branch out from this place and build the temple of Yahweh. It is he who will build the temple of Yahweh, and he will be clothed with majesty and will sit and rule on its throne. And he will be a priest on his throne, and there will be harmony between the two. Speaking about Zerubbabel, they say, the crown will be given to Heldai, Tobiah, Yedidiah, Hen, son of Tzefani, as a memorial in the temple of Yahweh. Those who are far away will come and help build the temple of Yahweh. It's speaking about the second temple that was rebuilt in approximately 520 BCE, although no one knows the exact date, I don't think. And you will know that Yahweh Almighty has sent me to you. This will happen if you diligently obey Yahweh, your Lord. So that's Zechariah chapter 6. Now let's go to chapter 7, and we're going to switch over to the Hebrew. Okay, so verse 1. So it was in the 4th year of the reign of Dariavesh, the king. Now, when we started the book of Zechariah, at the very beginning of the book of Zechariah, okay, it was in the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius. So we're still in the reign of Dariavesh, but now we're in the 4th year of his reign. So this is 2 years later after Zechariah started having these visions. Okay, there'll be a time we get into who is Darius. It's very interesting, but we're not going to do it right now. So Vayhi b'shnat arba leDariavesh Melech. So it was in the 4th year of Dariavesh, Darius the king. Haya devar Yahweh el Zechariah be'arba'ah lechodesh atashii b'kislev. So the word of Yahweh was upon Zechariah in the 4th of the month of the 9th month, which is Kislev. So Kislev, this is a Babylonian name. These are the names that Jews use to this day. These Babylonian names. Kislev is the month in which Hanukkah takes place, although the events of Hanukkah were much later than this, 350 years later than this. Okay, so it's in the wintertime, around Hanukkah time. Vayishlach Bet El Sar Etzer War Rehem Melech V'anshav, and it was sent or dispatched to, let's see what they translate here. Okay, so the people of Bethel sent Sar Etzer and Regem Melech and his people. We're not going to get into who those are right now. It doesn't matter. Lechalot et Pnei Yahweh, to entreat Yahweh, to entreat the face of Yahweh, or before the face of Yahweh. Okay. Lemor el hakohanim asher lebeit Yahweh tzivaot ve'el nevi'im lemor, to say to the Kohanim who were in the house of Yahweh, in the house of Yahweh of hosts, ve'el nevi'im lemor, and to the prophets, say, ha'ivkeh b'chodesh ha'chamishi He nazer kasher asiti ze kamesh shanim. This is very interesting, and this also relates to a kind of a discussion that's going on in Karaism in modern times. So we'll talk about this in a second. So to say to the Kohanim who are in the house of Yahweh Tziva'ot, talking about the second temple. So at this point, the second temple has been rebuilt, or is in the process of being rebuilt. And to the prophets, saying, so they send these people. So from Bet El, they sent these representatives, one named Sar Etzer, and the other one named Regem Melech, and then a whole bunch of accompanying people. And they send him to Jerusalem to inquire of the Kohanim and of the prophets. Okay. What do they want to know? What do these people Bethel want to know? Should I cry? Should I weep in the 5th month? We'll talk about what this means in the 5th month. And should I restrain myself or restrict myself from pleasure? As I've done already for many years, for these years. Okay, let's get a little context. We'll go to Robert Alter here, and we'll see something very interesting. It'll come up. What is going on? There we go. So Bethel, this was the location of one of the 2 principal sanctuaries of the northern kingdom. So again, I don't want to get into detail here, but after Yerovam breaks off from Rehoboam, he sets up 2 golden calves, one in Bethel and one in Dan. So Bethel is where one of these golden calves was set up. It cannot be a place name here, and is also not used as a designation for the temple. Its literal meaning house of God. On the evidence of documents from Jewish community of Elephantine in Egypt in this period, it was also used as a man's name. So I guess what he's saying that Bethel is the name of a person, not that these people are sent from Bethel. Anyway, so these 3 people, according to Robert Alter, these are 3 people and accompanying men. Okay, so they go to the temple in Jerusalem. Okay, and then the 5th month. So the 5th month, so they're asking, should we afflict ourselves? Should we fast, essentially, in the 5th month as we've done for these many years? What happened in the 5th month? The 5th month is the month of Av. To this day, the rabbis celebrate a holiday called Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, where they sit around and many of them cry crocodile tears over the destruction of the 1st and 2nd temple. If we look at the end of the book of Jeremiah and at the end of the book of 2nd Kings, we see dates. And let me just do this very quickly. Wow, it's getting late. But that's it. So if we look at the end of, let's go to Jeremiah, the end of Jeremiah. Jeremiah. So right at the end of the book of Jeremiah, so this details the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. And maybe we can read through this very quickly. The fall of Jerusalem, or maybe we're going a bit far off field, but I'll do it very quickly. Zedekiah, I'll do it in the English. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal. It doesn't matter. He did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, just as Jehoiakim had done. It was because of Yahweh's anger that all this happened to Jerusalem and Judea. And in the end, he thrust them from his presence. Now Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, which is also celebrated to this day, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. They encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. And this is Asra B'Tevet. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through and the whole army fled. So this is when the Babylonians breached the walls of Jerusalem. This is the 9th day of the 4th month. They left the city at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden, though the Babylonians were surrounding the city. So we're talking about the Jewish armies fled. They fled towards the Arava, but the Babylonian army pursued King Zedekiah and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon in Riblah, in the land of Hamat, where he pronounced sentence on him. There at Riblah, the king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He also killed all the officials of Judah. Then he put out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon, where he put him in prison till the day of his death. On the 10th day of the 5th month, this is what this is speaking about, when Zechariah chapter 7 is referring to this, when it says, again, we'll go with Robert Alter's translation, that three people, Bet-El and Sharezer and Regem Melech, came to ask the priests and the prophets, should I mourn and fast in the 5th month, as I've done for so many years? Why were they mourning and fasting in the 5th month? This is because of what happened on the 10th day of the 5th month, as recorded in Jeremiah. On the 10th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard, who served the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. There's my cat who wants to come in. Come, Boo. Lavi. Come, Boo. Lavi, come, sweetie boy. Lavi. No? Why is your tail all popped up? Come, baby. Come. You chasing away cats? Is that why your tail's all popped up? Come, baby. Go over there. 1 second, guys. 1 second, boys and girls. Come, move. Oh, I'm going to move you over here just for a second, sweetie. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Come, baby. Come over here. Come. No, don't do that. There we go. That's good. Rest. Okay, so in the 9th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard who served the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of Yahweh, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. So on the 10th day of the 5th month, this is when the temple was destroyed. The first temple was destroyed. Now, the rabbis celebrated on the 9th day of the 5th month. Why? Well, we won't get into that right now, but they do. And this is not backed up anywhere in the Tanakh. We also have another account in 2 Kings. And I bring that up for a second. At the end of 2 Kings, which gives it another date. Let's find it. So at the very last chapter of 2 Kings, we have another account of the destruction of the first temple. So we have the 9th day of the 4th month. That's in line with what we saw in Jeremiah. There was famine in the city. City wall was broken through. Okay. It's almost word for word. But then we have here on the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of the Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he set fire to the temple of Yahweh. So here we have, on the 10th day of the 5th month, it says in Jeremiah, and here we have in the 7th day of the 5th month. So why are the accounts different? We won't get into the reasons right now, but many people say that Jeremiah is the more accurate one. That was on the 10th day of the 5th month, but it was definitely not on the 9th day of the 5th month. Nonetheless, this is what Zechariah chapter 7 is referring to. The Israelites, the Judeans, the Judeans, the Jews had taken upon themselves to mourn the 10th day. We'll say the 10th day will go according to the date of Jeremiah, had taken upon themselves to mourn the 10th day of the 5th month each year by essentially fasting, by withdrawing from pleasures on that day. So now we saw that we saw in chapter 6 that the temple had already been rebuilt or was in the process of being rebuilt. Right? That was the prophecy in 6. And so now the second temple is already built or being rebuilt. And so the people, or these people, Bet-El and Sharezer and Regem Melech, they come to the priests and the prophets in Jerusalem, and they said, should we continue to mourn and fast in the 5th month, as we've done for so many years? Should we continue to commemorate this destruction of the first temple, which occurred, according to Jeremiah, on the 10th day of the 5th month, according to 2 Kings, on the 7th day of the 5th month, but never on the 9th day of the 5th month, by the way. The rabbis made that one up for reasons we won't get into right now. But it's speaking about, if we go back now to Robert Alter, this is the month of Av, when the destruction of the first temple occurred. Okay, let me just check in and see if there are any comments or questions. Can you guys hear me okay? Let's just make sure we're broadcasting here. I don't see. One second. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Alrighty. So, all right. So that's verse 3. So that's what's going on. That's the context in Zechariah chapter 7. And then we have a peh here, which means it's almost like a chapter ending. Okay. Waihi devar Yahweh tzivaot elai lemor. So this is the answer. Yahweh of hosts responds and says, Emor el kol am haaretz, tell all the people of the land, ve'el kohanim, and to the and the priests, to say, Kitzamtem. This is a famous and beautiful verse. Kisamtem, usapod, v'hamishi, u'b'shvi'i, u'zesh, v'zeh, shiv'im shana atzon, tzamtuni ani. So when, the cats are hearing some noise. When you have fasted and mourned in the 5th month, and in the, oh, what is going on? Hold on one second, please. Okay, I don't know. Anyway, strange noises. So when you have fasted and mourned in the 5th month and in the 7th month for these 70 years, remember Jeremiah said that the exile will last 70 years, and he tells the Judeans when they exiled to Babylonia to sit down and make gardens and build houses. So for these 70 years, when you've been mourning over the destruction of the first temple, were you really fasting for me? See how Robert Alter translates that one. Okay, shall I weep and practice abstinence in the 5th month as I've done for years? And the word of the Lord of armies came to me, saying, say to the people of the land, the priest saying, though you fasted and mourned in the 5th month and the 70 and the 70 years, have you actually fasted for me? Okay, is there any commentary on that one? That's a famous verse. So the latter would be the fast of the commemorating the assassination of Gedaliah, which is also mentioned. Who was appointed governor of Judah after the Babylonian conquest. Mentioned in the book of Jeremiah, if I'm not mistaken. No, not Jeremiah. It doesn't matter. Anyway, neither of these fasts, of course, has any basis in the Torah, and so the people understandably wanted directive from Yahweh through the temple priests and the temple prophets about whether these fasts should be observed. Have you actually fasted for me? God is not enjoying these fasts, and they are no more than a human initiative to express collective grief, which is not the thing God wants. Just give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second just to see one thing. just want to remember where it does speak about Gedalia. It does speak about Gedalia. Jeremiah chapter 40. Okay, at any rate, I also need 2 Kings. Alrighty, so let's get back to the Hebrew. Right? So when you've been fasting for these 70 years, did you actually fast for me? In other words, was this from the heart? Was this fast from the heart? Right? Okay. V'chi tochelu, v'chi tishtu. And when you eat and when you drink, halo etem ochlim, etem shotim. Are you not eating and drinking for yourselves? Verse 7, Halo et devarim asher qara Yahweh biyad haniviim harishonim biyot Yerushalayim yoshevet usheleva ve'areha svivoteha. Stop there. Is it not according to the words asher qara Yahweh b'niviim harishonim, which Yahweh cried out through the hands of the earlier prophets, of the first prophets? Biyot Yerushalayim Yoshevet, while Jerusalem was still inhabited, Shleva, and at peace, with Arehas Svivoteha, and all of the towns around it, its suburbs, Negev, Shvela Yoshev, and the desert or the southern desert, the Negev, and it's still an area today, the Negev desert, right? And the Shvela and the coastal plain inhabited. Okay, so let's get a little commentary there. Are you not the ones who eat and you the ones who drink? Eating and drinking like abstention or a human affair that does not really concern God. Are these not the words that Yahweh proclaimed through the former prophets? The words are not spelled out. Oops. The words are not spelled out, but Zechariah would have in mind prophecies, the one in Isaiah 1, where God proclaims that he does not want people to trample through the courts of the temple when their hands are filled with blood. And also that we saw in the beginning of the book of Zechariah, where it mentions the former prophets. If I remember correctly. Okay, dwell tranquil. Tranquil does not appear here in the Hebrew either. It was dropped in scribal transmission, or tranquil in the preceding clause was meant to do double duty. That's in verse 7. What is he trying to say? Let me just see something here. Verse 7. Dwell tranquil. I see what he's trying to say. Right. He's trying to say that this word shleva was left out over here. It doesn't matter. Okay. It's just a textual point for me, really. Okay. Right? So why didn't you listen to the former prophets? So really, this is the key, right? When you fast and mourn in the 5th month and the 7th month, are you really fasting for me? And when you eat and drink, isn't it you who are eating and drinking? In other words, well, Robert Alter is interpreting this as if it has nothing to do with God, but I don't think I'm not interpreting it this way. I see it as meaning that, was it from the heart? Were you really fasting for my sake? Or are you just doing it on your own? I guess it's kind of what Robert Alter is saying, okay? Why didn't you listen to the words of the former prophets while before Jerusalem had been destroyed, before Judea had been destroyed? Why didn't you listen to the words of the prophets then? Instead, all you have left to do is fast and refrain from eating as some kind of mourning. Mourning, mourning. Okay? All right, let's go on. Wahi davar Yahweh el Zechariah lemor. So the word of Yahweh was upon Zechariah to say, Ko amar Yahweh tzivaot lemor. So says Yahweh of hosts. Again, I'm just translating the usual translation of Yahweh of hosts. So I'm just translating it that way to say, Mishpat emet, shiftu, v'chesed, v'rachamim asu, ish et echau, et achiu. So says Yahweh of hosts, saying, do judge, true judgment, judgments of truth, v'chesed v'rachamim asu, and do kindness and mercy to each other, each person to his fellow man, to his brother. So in other words, this is backing up exactly what was being said here. Okay? When you fasted and mourned, were you doing it for me? In other words, was it from the heart? Or were you just doing it for yourselves? And furthermore, why didn't you listen? You wouldn't have needed to have done any of this if you'd listened to the previous prophets, the earlier prophets who were calling out to you to avoid the destruction of Jerusalem and Judea. So I don't want your fasts, is basically what Yahweh is saying here. What he's saying is, instead of your stupid fasts, okay, just do fair judgment, judge fairly, judge with truth, and do kindness, be kind and merciful to each other. And do not oppress or take advantage of the widow and the orphan and the ger, the sojourner, the convert, the ani, and the poor person. And do not plot evil or do not think evil in your hearts against your fellow man, against your Israelite brothers, your Jewish brothers. Yima'anu lakshiv. Waitnu kapef soraret. Wa'aznehem yichbidu mishmoa. So this is again, I think this is now referring to what the former prophets were saying. Okay? And they refused to listen, to pay attention. And they turned their shoulders away from. They turned their shoulders away. I guess the figurative expression would be they turned their backs to me. And they made their ears. They covered their. Again, I'll translate that literally, and then I'll translate figuratively. So yima'anu lakshiv. They refused to listen. And they turned their shoulders away from me. And they made their ears heavy, too heavy to listen, or so heavy that they would not listen. So in other words, they refused the words of these former prophets. Walibam samu shamir mishmo et Torah et dvarim asher shalach Yahweh tzevaot berucho biyad nevi'im harishonim. So this is now explicitly speaking about the previous prophets. Libam samul shamir. So shamir is rock or flint. So they made their hearts like stone and refused the instruction and the words that Yahweh of hosts had sent through his spirit in the hands of the earlier prophets. And so therefore there was great anger from Yahweh of hosts. Okay, let's check in and see if there are any questions or comments. Verse 13, and so it is, or so it was, as they called out, meaning the earlier prophets, and they would not listen, and the Jews would not listen, the Judahites would not listen. So I decided that when they called out, I would not listen, says Yahweh Tzivaot. And I, from Sa'ar means like a storm, so I translated scattered them. That doesn't really explain the meaning of this word. It's almost like I caused a storm here. I caused the storms to scatter them might be a better way to translate this. Wa'asarem, I caused a storm to scatter them, not a literal storm, but a meaning, the Babylonian armies. Al kol hagoyim, to all of the nations, asher lo yadu'um, who they did not know, Aretz not Shema, and the land became desolate, acharehem, behind them or after them, me'avor meshav, from anyone who is passing through, literally from one who comes in one way and then returns, passes through and then returns. Yasumu eretz chamda b'shama, and they turn a beautiful land into a desolation, a pleasant land into a desolation. All right, so let's get a little bit of commentary again from Robert Alter here. Okay, judge true justice in verse 9. Although this appears to be a new prophecy, the editorial logic of its placement here is that these demands for social justice are God's words, that what he wants rather than fasts, right? So that's what we mentioned. And I will roll them out over all the nations, right? So that's how Robert Alter is translating this word here. He says, whirl them out. So I said, scatter them by storm, or send a storm to scatter them. Okay, Robert Alter is translating, whirl them out. Given Zechariah's role promising a Davidic restoration and urging the rebuilding of the temple, it is unlikely that he could be addressing this blistering prophecy of exile to his contemporaries. Rather, this would be a citation of God's pronouncement of doom on the rebellious generation 7 decades earlier. It says clearly that these are the words of the former prophets. The situation of the prophecy in the historical moment leading up to 586 BCE, that's when the first temple was destroyed, is spelled out in the last sentence here, which uses a past tense, so-called converted future, for its report of turning the land into a desolation. So that's just a grammatical point for me. We don't have to get into that right now. The grandparents of Zechariah's audience then ignored God's teaching and consequently reduced their land to ruins. Now the people of Zechariah's time inhabiting the ruins have been summoned to the task of rebuilding. Okay, so that's Zechariah chapter 7. This is a much more straightforward prophecy than the ones that we've heard before, and the strange visions, the bizarre visions that that Zechariah had. Let's go through again very briefly, and I'm just going to read through it so we can get the context in full, because it is straightforward, without any commentary. So this is again Zechariah chapter 7. I think we're going to end it here. I'm not going to get into Deuteronomy because it's getting late here and I need to end. So it was in the 4th year of King Darius of Persia. The word of Yahweh was upon Zechariah on the 4th day of the 9th month, which was Kislev, same month that as I mentioned, Hanukkah was later celebrated in. Again, I'm going according to Robert Alter's translation here, and Bet El Sar Etzer Regemelech Anashau, and so 3 people and their men were sent lachlot et pnei Yahweh, to entreaty, to find out the will of Yahweh, to entreat the face of Yahweh, which means to go to Jerusalem. Verse 3, Lemor el hakonim asher lebeit Yahweh, to say to the priests that were in the house of Yahweh, Sivaot, the house of Yahweh, of hosts, ve'ela nivi'im, and to the prophets, also who hung out in the temple, the second temple, area, to say, Aivke, b'chodesh hamishi, ki nazer kasher asiti ze kama shanim, should I mourn in the 5th month? Remember, we said the 5th month was the month of Av, which Jeremiah, the end of Jeremiah chapter 52, reports that the destruction of the temple by Nebuzaradan, the head of the army of Nebuchadnezzar, was on the 10th of the 5th month. 2 Kings reports it on the 7th of the 10th month. And either way, it's referring to the destruction of the first temple. So should I continue to mourn in the 5th month and to refrain from pleasures as I've been doing all of these years? As we have been doing all of these years, even though it says I, it really means we. Wahi devar Yahweh tzevaot elai lemor, and the word of Yahweh of hosts was upon me to say, Emor el kol ama aretz, say to all the people of the land, all the people in Judea, right? The returnees, or the ones who had never been exiled in the first place, the poor ones who had never been exiled in the first place, plus the returnees such as Zerubbabel, Nehemiah, Ezra, who had come back, and many other people, Ela Kohanim lemor, and to the Kohanim to say, Kitzamtem v'sapod b'chamishi v'shvi'i v'zeh shivim shana atzom tzamtuni ani. So say to all the people and to the Kohanim, when you've been fasting and mourning in the fifth month and in the seventh month, these 70 years, were you really fasting for me? Verse 6. And when you eat and when you drink, is it not you who are eating and drinking for yourselves? In other words, this is not from the heart. This was not for me. Hello, את הדברים אשר קרא יהוה ביד הנביאים הראשונים בהיות ירושלים יושבת ושלווה ועריה סביבותיה והנגב והשפלה יושב. So why did you not listen? Why did you not listen? Or would not it have been better for you to listen to the words that Yahweh placed into the mouths or called out through the hands of the original prophets, of the earlier prophets, when Jerusalem was still inhabited and at peace, and its towns were nestled around it, and the Negev desert and the coastal plain were inhabited. Verse 8, and further the word of Yahweh came upon Zechariah to say, so says Yahweh of hosts, to say, Mishpat emet shaftu. So this is again quoting those earlier prophets. Okay, make judgments of truth, or judge judgments of truth. And do kindness. Each person should do kindness and mercy to his fellow man, to his brother. And do not oppress the widow and the orphan, the convert, the ger, and the poor person. And do not think bad thoughts about your fellow man. Do not think bad thoughts about your fellow man in your hearts. So this is clearly, as we said, what the earlier prophets were saying while Jerusalem was still settled before the destruction by the Babylonians. And they refused to listen, and they turned their backs to me. Literally, they turned their shoulders away from me. And they made their ears heavy so that they wouldn't hear. And they made their hearts like stone. Mishmo the Torah, from listening to these instructions, the et dvarim, and these words, which Yahweh had sent, which Yahweh of hosts had sent through his spirit, from his spirit, in the hands of these earlier prophets. And there was great anger from Yahweh of hosts. Verse 13. And so this is again saying at the time, and as they called, and as they called out, meaning the prophets, as these earlier prophets called out, and the people did not listen, so they will call out, and I will not listen to them. Amar Yahweh Tzevaot, says Yahweh of hosts, verse 14. And I will bring a storm to scatter them among all of the nations, asher lo yadu'um, who they didn't know. Not shama, and the land will remain desolate after them, or once they are gone. Avor meshav, to the eyes of he who passes through it, who goes to and fro across the land will look at it and see how desolate it is. V'yasimu eretz chamda l'shama, and they will yasimu eretz chamda l'shama, and a beautiful land will have been turned into a desolation. So that is Zechariah chapter 7. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And thank God, a little bit more straightforward than some of the earlier chapters of Zechariah that we saw earlier. So we've been going at it for about over 2 hours. I'm a little bit tired. I guess we're not going to have time to get into Leviticus. There's a lot that I would like to point out. Maybe I can go a little bit longer now. It's getting pretty late here. I think we're going to end the study for today, and we'll pick it up in Leviticus next week. Maybe I'll skip the first part, the biblical archaeology, and we'll get directly into Zechariah and into Leviticus. Any questions, any comments before we say goodbye? Well, if not, then I thank you for joining us. This has been Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you are in the world. And we will see you again next week. We'll go out with some music, as always. So just give me a second to set that up. One second, please.
ילדי הטוב והנאה, אל תירא ואל תפחד. My son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live. I pray we'll meet again if we will. Be still, love, don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream. Sleep and remember my last lullaby. So I'll be with you when you dream. River, oh river, flow gently for me. Such precious cargo you bear. Do you know somewhere he can live free? River, dear river in the you're safe now, and safe may you stay. For I have a prayer just for you. Grow, baby brother, come back someday. Come and deliver us too.